Good afternoon, everyone. My name is LIZA SCHVARTZMAN, and I'm a first-year full-time MBA student and panel director of today's first panel discussion, Leadership, the Role of Women. The World Bank reports that some 70 million women joined the Latin America workforce in the last 20 years, helping reduce regional poverty by 30%. But even women with the higher education and formal employment still earn 17% less than their male counterparts. Our moderator and panelists will explore why, for example, women have done disproportionately well in the political realm in Latin America, yet in business, they seem to lag very far behind. Is it family traditions, educational traditions, unfriendly policies? And what can businesses do on their own to institute better policies to advance women equally in the workforce? The distinguished speakers on this panel are Ambassador Jeffrey Davidow, Senior Counselor at the Cohen Group and former U.S. Ambassador to Venezuela from 1993 to 1996, and to Mexico from 1998 to 2002. Ambassador Davidow has extensive diplomatic experience in both Latin America and Africa. In 2003, he retired from the U.S. State Department with the rank of Career Ambassador, the highest position in the Foreign Service. Then he served for 8 years as president of the Institute of the Americas in San Diego, a public policy center focused on Latin America. He is currently senior counselor of the Cohen Group, a Washington-based international business consultancy. Ambassador Davidow served as an advisor to President Obama for the 2009 Summit of the Americas. He received a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Massachusetts and a Master of Arts from the University of Minnesota. Ambassador Cecilia Nahón, Ambassador of the Argentine Republic to the United States, has served in the public and private sectors as well as the academic sector. Prior to her current appointment as the Ambassador of the Argentine Republic to the United States, Ambassador Nahón served as Secretary of International Economic Relations of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Worship of Argentina. In such capacity, she acted as National Coordinator of the Mercosur Common Market Group and Secretary of the Board of Directors of the Export Promotion Agency, Fundación Exportar. She also served as Undersecretary of Investment Development within the same ministry during 2011. Ambassador Nahón holds a PhD in Social Sciences from the Latin American School of Social Sciences, an MS in Development Studies from the London Business School of Economics, and a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Buenos Aires. Fernanda Vicente is the president and co-founder of Mujeres del Pacifico, an international network of female entrepreneurs, CEO and founder of Initia, a go-to-market program for Latin American R&D talents, and the founder of numerous other companies, including 101 Monkeys, Viral, Dillard, Amelie, and Codea. She began her career as a journalist and marketer for companies in Chile and Australia, before jumping into the world of entrepreneurship in 2007. She was part of the founding team of the Association of Entrepreneurs of Chile and also of the Association of Entrepreneurs of Latin America. Fernanda completed her undergraduate studies at Universidad Diego Portales in Chile and obtained master's degrees in marketing communication from the University of California, Irvine, and in innovation from Universidad Católica in Chile. The panel will be moderated by Dean Judy Olian. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you each for joining us. I'm just going to prime the discussion for a moment with a few facts and continue on with the facts that Professor Edward Sebastian spoke about around women. I'm particularly passionate about women and advancing women, but I also think it's a very clear economic benefit. It's not just the right thing to do and the fair thing to do. There's very clear evidence that it provides economic benefits, not just because of the consumer reach and the understanding of the consumers who you're talking to, but also because the entire decision-making process tends to improve with women on boards and in executive teams. And I'll give you a couple of stats from a McKinsey study looking at about 400 public firms across the UK, the US, Canada, and Latin America. Companies in the top quartile for gender diversity had 15% were 15% more likely to have financial returns above their respective means in their country. And those that were in the lowest quartile on both gender and race and ethnicity were statistically less likely to achieve the average financial returns for the companies in that data set. So you're basically shooting yourself in the foot if you don't have diversity in your top management team because you're losing out on economic returns. Some Catalyst work, Catalyst is the think tank for women in business, shows very clearly that diversity on boards also results in higher ROE, substantially higher return on equity, return on investment. And in part, as a result of that, some countries in Europe are actually setting quotas, and I use that word pretty liberally, quotas for the percent of women on boards. So you'd say, fine, I expect Norway and Iceland, they're out there in terms of diversity, and they have a quota for 40%. But Spain has a quota for 40% of women on boards, and France will implement that quota in 2017. So how do women do in Latin America on executive committees? Here are the numbers. Colombia, 17%. Peru, 10%. Chile, 8%. Brazil, 7%. Argentina, 7%. Mexico, 5%. That's on the executive committees of management. On boards, Colombia, 9%. Peru, 4%. Chile, 4%. Brazil, 5%. Argentina, 3%. And Mexico, 6%. Now, in the US, we have nothing to brag about. It's 17% of women on boards in the US. But to the extent that this results in return on investment, return on equity, we really have a long way to go and improve in Latin America. Now, as Lisa mentioned and as Sebastian mentioned, surprisingly in politics, women have done much better in Latin America. So there are 4 countries in Latin America, including the ABCs and Costa Rica, who have female presidents. Between 2006 and 2011, the proportion of women in Nicaragua's National Assembly went from 19% to 40%. And in general, in Latin America, and I say that with a grain of salt because, as Sebastian said, it is not a monolith, women occupy more than a quarter of the total parliamentary seats, and it's second only to Scandinavia in political representation, which is rather remarkable. But it's not a surprise because it actually comes about, again, because of quotas. In 1991, Argentina implemented a quota requiring that at least 30% of legislative candidates be women. And today, there are more than a dozen Latin American countries that have similar quotas of a certain minimum percentage of political representation. Of course, that's well ahead of the United States. Sebastian gave the names. And I might remind everyone, we've never had a woman president. We're always hoping. But of course, the logic is that if you have higher percentages of women representation in politics, that will effectuate broader change because they're in positions of power to spread the benefits. Well, it's happened in politics in Latin America, but it certainly hasn't happened in business. Workplaces in Latin America still lag significantly. And that has huge economic effects, as we just talked about, but it also has huge societal effects. So, of course, this is the point of this panel. What can we do in the various countries that our experts know about to advance the status of women in business, to not just benefit women and families, but to benefit economies as a whole? So I'm now going to ask each of the panelists to make a brief statement, so that we can go into questions. So why don't we start from you, Fernanda, and to get your views on women in business, in particular in entrepreneurship, because of your background.
Yes. Well, first I want to say thank you. Thank you, Judy, for the invitation, for having me here. Yes. Well, I want to start first as the view I have of the region. I think that we are in a time that is historical, something that is getting totally new. It's a new scenario for Latin America. For the first time, I see that we are working together, that we really want to communicate. We really want to have a same common language. Portuñol with Brazil, a new way of speaking Spanish. And this is not only something nice to say, it is real. It is happening really, really fast in the region. Now, specific with the Pacific Alliance, which is the group with Mexico, Peru, Colombia, and Chile, it's not only in the political field. This is something really in the practical field. We are seeing that we are working together. We are trying to have common laws, something that we can all do at the same time. And also we have, these big owners of company being together in this council, trying to find out how is the best way to work as one group. Also, we have this group of Mujeres del Pacifico, which for the first time, women of these 4 countries, we are getting together to start building the new economy of our region. And this is not only about Pacific Alliance. I mean, we see Mercosur, but we are not 2 different groups. I mean, I think for us it's very funny because we have Mujeres del Pacifico and we have a board of advisors big in Brazil, and they have no Pacific. And this is so weird when I receive a call and say, I'm interested in having a board of advisors for Mujeres del Pacifico here in Sao Paulo. And we were amazed. I mean, how come? And Adriana Machado, which is a very important person in the business area, she told me because we need to connect with the region. For the first time, Brazil is looking outside the borders. And this is totally new. And it's the same with Argentina. We are trying to have a group there. And you don't have Pacific, but this is bigger than an ocean. We are thinking about Latin America as a whole group. And as Sebastian said, yeah, we are totally different, but we have more common things than different things. And coming with women, why we created Mujeres del Pacifico is because we are in a time where everything is possible and it's true. The paradigm is changing so fast. We are, now standing over a new way of doing everything, not only in Latin America, but all around the world. But in Latin America, we have huge opportunities, especially in social innovation. We are good at that. We have talents. We have brains. Maybe we don't have the best infrastructure. Maybe we are not, don't have the best, big, huge companies or industry, but we have talents. As Sebastian said, in different many areas. But for entrepreneurship, we have good quality of people, well prepared, people that has a lot of, enthusiasm, and that are willing to take the world. And it's not only people that are in the upper side of the pyramid. If you go down, you will see hundreds and thousands of women that really need to change the situation they have in the country. Today, we have strong government, which is good. They help us, but we know that the work we have to do it's our work. We can't rely on the government to do that. And it's something that we are taking as a mission. If you want to change the destiny of your family, the destiny of your community, you have to take that action. We can't still waiting. It has taken so much time to change. We can do that change, and we really believe that. And that's why we founded Mujeres del Pacifico, because we saw that opportunity. We can call that we have like a pyramid of the power, something like that. The higher you go in the position, the fewer the women you see. In Latin America, 22% of the businesses are small businesses, the businesses that are founded by women. If you go up, only 9% of big companies have a woman as a leader. And this is so easy to really change it. The thing is, why we have a lot of entrepreneurship in the small companies? For needs, mainly, that for opportunity. Why we don't have that in a higher position, in higher sizes of the business? And I truly believe that it's one word, education. Access to the information. That's the main key. We can talk of many things here, about public policies. We can talk about networks. We can talk about role models, which are all very important. But I think the number one is access to the information. I'm not smarter than anyone here or anyone in Latin America. I've had better access to information. That's it. And I think that there is the key. When a woman feels that knows, she feels powerful. She really feels that she can change everything. And it doesn't matter if the boss says, you're not good. I feel I'm good, so I will do it. We are teaching innovation to women. We have our innovation lab. Why innovation? Why we start with innovation? Because we can lead innovation in the companies. We can, take that flag. If women, leaders, innovation in big, small, and medium-sized company, definitely we will open every door. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Fernanda. Thank you. Ambassador.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Judy, for the invitation, and to my colleague panelists for being here. I think that, as has been said, female leadership is already a reality in Latin America, and I am very optimistic about how this is going to increasingly be more reflected in all the different aspects of our social, political, and also business life. We have 3 female presidents in South America, a lot more in the region, and it means that 45% of the population of Latin America is now governed by women. In fact, from the ABC countries in the region, not only we have female presidents, but 3 leaders that have been re-elected as presidents, which I think is very important to show the amount of support that these leaders could build in their own economies. And of course, it's my president, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, who has been elected and re-elected in Argentina. And it's not only the president, in fact, the presence of women leaders in Congress in Argentina has been growing very much. As you mentioned, we were at the forefront in having female quotas for Congress in the 90s, and now a little bit less than 40% of our Congress men and women are females in both chambers. And this is also reflecting, I think, a much better policy, because to be able to build and continue building for gender equality and for female inclusion, I think that one thing that is key is that we need more inclusive societies. In general, more equal societies, societies in which human rights are respected, are strengthened, and are permanently expanded. And this is the case in Argentina. I think this is the case in Latin America. We have a region of peace. We have a region of increasing inclusion. The rise of the middle class in the region has been key, and has been key for giving more opportunities to women as well. 100 persons were part of the middle class in the region 10 years ago. Now it's 150. In the case of Argentina, 68% was the amount of growth of our middle class in the last 10 years. And it has been certainly reflected in having more women accessing to a lot of different social and political benefits. Let me give you 2 examples of programs that I think have been very effective in terms of getting women to be more active in society, and in particular in the labor market as well. One is a program that was put in place in Argentina a few years ago, which basically recognized long-standing rights of women doing domestic work, domestic paid work. In fact, this was for everybody doing domestic work, people that were working in very fragile situations historically, and they were given, through a law that was enacted by Congress, the same labor rights that any other worker in the economy. Why can't you have that? And this certainly has created a very important level of protection and of inclusion of women, and in general of workers in that situation. Also, a very ambitious program in Argentina was universally put into place, but specifically targeted to women as well, to give pension coverage to people that didn't have pension coverage all throughout their history. Now 97% of the population in Argentina has a good pension coverage, and this includes certainly a lot of women. And I think this type of policies all throughout the region are also showing that women have had, and still have, a very important transformational role in terms of building more fair and more equal societies in business as well, but more in general in our countries. I have to recognize that in our history we have very brave, very strong women that have fought for the rights of our people, even in the more obscure moments. You probably know, a lot of you here, the history of Abuelas de Plaza de Mayo, of Madres de Plaza de Mayo, who are world emblems of fighting against impunity for the respect of human rights. We are very proud of their work in Argentina. And in the worst period of our time, they spoke up for their children, but they spoke up for justice and against the military dictatorship that was ruling our country, even exposing themselves to violence, because it was a moment where people couldn't even get together to express themselves, and they did it, and they found a way to fight for good cause and for their kids and for in many cases, the grandchildren that were kidnapped during the military dictatorship. We move forward from that. It's 31 years since the recovery of democracy in Argentina. We have a very democratic and vibrant democracy all throughout the continent. And I think the women are very important players in building this democracy and in giving a more ample and inclusive society for us all. Of course, there are challenges ahead. Certainly in the business sector, there are still some challenges. We can talk about that a bit later, but I'm an optimist in terms of the role that women have been having. We have our own very important examples in our own countries and region, but certainly there's more challenges and there's more for women to do in Argentina and in general in the world. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Well, thank you very much. And as always happens when one is the last in a panel, you can say, all the brilliant thoughts that I was going to express to you have already been taken. Let me just make a couple of comments, which I think are perhaps important, or at least important to me, in terms of setting a general context about the questions relating to gender in Latin America, indeed in all countries. I think that perhaps the greatest obstacle to women in Latin America and throughout the world are the same obstacles that apply to everyone in societies that have deficits in the rule of law. What do I mean by that? There are countries in Latin America, and later we can be specific if you want, where what we term the rule of law, that is predictable legislation enforced by honest and incorruptible judicial systems, reinforced by a culture that refuses to accept deviations in the form of corruption. This is what opens a society to innovation, competition, progress. And when a society is on that road, naturally, women will benefit, perhaps even disproportionately. I don't mean to in any way minimize what we're discussing here today, or what we've already talked about the tremendous advances which have been made, and I am quite confident will be made. But this must be put into a context in which the rule of law, the Estado de Derecho, is given greater importance. The idea that, for instance, in Argentina, to take an example, it has excellent legislation to protect domestic servants, would mean nothing in another country, let's say, let's not talk about Argentina, if the enforcement of that was not carried out by competent, fair administration, backed up by further legislation, and implemented through a judicial or quasi-judicial system, which is free of taint, so to speak. So I do believe that what we're seeing, and part of, I think a large part of the progress that we have seen in this hemisphere in recent years relating to women and their role in society has been a result of a growing understanding and pressure for a greater element of rule of law, predictability, honesty, implementation. And that is obvious to me. Let me just make another point which I think we all agree with. In an environment like this, we are obviously focusing on the role of women in business and politics. The majority of women in Latin America are not involved in politics except as citizens. A majority of the women who are involved in business are involved in commerce at a rather low level, that of the individual entrepreneur, the persons who work in markets, what have you, domestic workers. Having looked at this, not with any great intelligence, but with having a lot of experience over the last 30 or 40 years in Latin America, I am absolutely convinced that the best investment that any Latin American country can make, and the best investment any organization, whether it's a multinational organization like the World Bank, the IMF, the Inter-American Bank, or a government like the US government, the best investment that can be made relates to the education of girls. That is, it's not just a question of equity. It's not a question of doing the right thing or the fair thing. There is more bang for the buck, as we say, in the education of girls than in any other possible form of assistance or intervention. And so those are 2 points I want to make of a generic nature. One, we can talk about the progress that has been made in Latin America by women, and we hope will be made more. But that has to come within a context of greater justice, greater legislation, greater rule of law for everyone. And secondly, I want us to focus, and I know we all agree on this, on the role of supporting education for girls, because that's really where the issue lies. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask a few questions, and then maybe, because we're running a bit behind, we'll also have time for some brief questions from the audience here. And if you'll indulge us for a little bit longer. So with all due respect to the panel, the fact is that the progress on women in business is not good, and frankly isn't even good in America. Indeed, it's stagnated, but still America is further ahead and has been at this longer. And so you offered two conjectures, two hypotheses about what, this is Ambassador Davidow, about what we might do, and that's the belief in the rule of law and the predictability of enforcement. But I want to get at the more basic level. Why is it, do you think, that in business in particular, generally speaking, Latin America is lagging around the advancement of women at the senior levels? We're not talking about the lower levels, we're talking about the senior levels, the leadership of business, the upper executive level, and certainly the CEOs. And I have to say, I spend quite a bit of time in Latin America, and I've never met with a female CEO. I know there are some, but I've never met with a female CEO, and I've met many CEOs there. So is it family traditions? Is it differential educational access? Is it really gender power structures, the way the traditions of society? Is it policies that are just unfriendly to working families, that you can't have two working families? What is it, do you think, that needs to change fundamentally beyond what you mentioned, Ambassador Davidow, that will prompt further advancement? Is it quotas? I'll go back to you. And we're going to go the reverse here.
Well, I hope I won't put us in reverse, but let me just... I think all of the things you mentioned play a role. There certainly are cultural factors, and not to descend into the whole of anecdotes, but I remember talking with a very important Latin American government official, and we were talking about another official, very high-ranking, a female cabinet minister, and we were talking about her policies. And this fellow said to me, you know, I was actually, as ambassador, complaining about a particular policy that this person, by happenstance, female cabinet minister had undertaken. And he looked at me and he said, well, you know, it all has to do with hormones. I really did not know how to respond. I just said, well, I really think it has more to do with politics and ideology than hormones. That exists. It exists in Latin America. Perhaps that kind of bias, I don't know whether it exists less in the United States or not, but it's there. It's part of the history in the cultural context. I'm sorry if I've offended anybody by saying this, but it is there. So the question is, what kind of structures can confront that? Now, quotas are a possibility. I don't personally agree with them. I'll tell you one thing that seems to have worked in the United States, not to the degree we would like to see, but has worked, is the fact that the management of corporations, especially publicly held corporations, come under a public scrutiny, which is generally not that common elsewhere in the world, and generally not that common in Latin America. And by public scrutiny, I mean not only checking the price of the stock every day, but noticing how a company is run, and being able, as stockholders and as other stakeholders, focusing on the issues of management. And as you focus on the issues of management, and there's a more open debate about that, then I think there's more opportunity to exert pressure, to have more women in positions of leadership. So if I were to say, you know, one kind of structural change that could perhaps impact the question that we're discussing today, it would be to find ways to ensure that the management of corporations, specifically publicly traded corporations, would be subject to greater study, comment, what have you. What we find in Latin America, as elsewhere in the world, a much greater focus in the last 10 years, 20 years, on issues of CSR, corporate social responsibility. And leading companies are worried about how they project themselves in terms of CSR, in terms of philanthropy, in terms of supporting labor, in terms of supporting education. But I would ask, is the question of the role of women in their particular organization, in a particular company, given the kind of weight that it should be given. And I think, from my perspective, it is not.
Thank you.
And I'm going to ask each of the panelists to maybe provide brief answers so that we can get through some more questions.
Okay,
Ambassador
thank you.
Nahón.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's all right. That wasn't a
I
comment.
think, Judy, that what you mentioned about the US is very relevant. I read an article a few months ago that said that in the boards of directors of S&P 1,500 companies here in the US, there were more directors, more men named John than women in general. So just one name more than all the women that were there. So this is, it was in the New York Times. This is certainly a challenge that I think we all share in different aspects. What I can say in the region is that certainly the people has been wiser and more open in picking up their leaders through both, be it presidents, be it for the Congress, for the governors, that in a way some business organizations have not yet picked so many women as we expect they will be. So certainly we are one way forward in that sense.
Do you think that would have happened without the quota? Do you think it would have happened?
The quota was very useful, but the current participation of women in Congress in Argentina, for example, exceeds far
It has
the
been
quota.
institutionalized. It's
Yeah,
been institutionalized already.
Exactly, it's been institutionalized and it's been surpassed by that. Of course, the institutionalized aspect helps, and I think it did in other countries in the region and in the world as well, in Europe and some, as you mentioned. And as well, I think that I tend to be optimistic about this because when you take a look at education, we can see that all throughout the region, certainly in Argentina, now at the university graduates, 55% of the people that graduate are women compared to 45% of men. At this specific moment, which is a very important sign of how we are trying to get a lot of progress on this. And there's also a lot of programs that are focused towards promoting entrepreneurship and towards promoting more engagement of women in the labor market all throughout. I think it's important to make it all throughout the entire labor spectrum, I mean, from the top to the bottom as well. We have a very interesting program that is called Ellas Hacen in Argentina that really wants to promote vulnerable women or women in a more vulnerable situation to engage and to participate in cooperatives with other women, and has been very successful. So I think we're addressing the challenges and doing a lot in this area, but certainly we're very dynamic societies, and there's still more to go.
I would like to add 3 things. First, I think we have to leave the pink chapter. We have been always, this pink chapter, like a part of the rest of the market, of the rest of the society, something like different. And we're not different. We are like 50% of the world, so we should be not in a different chapter first. The second thing is about education, but about teaching our men. I mean, we need more educated men in terms of supporting the success of their women, of their partners. We need partners, And I think in Latin America, because of this macho culture, it's harder. So that's a big, cultural issue that we have to start changing. And the other thing, it's about women that, in this time, I have seen many professional housewives. They are so well prepared. People that have had access to master's degrees and all around the world, and now are the best housewives. They manage everything for their laptop and for the smartphone, but they're at home. And we have a social mission to do. If you have the luck to have access to that education, I feel that they have to, give something back. And I think that they feel that way, that they are not have a place in the companies because of the purpose. Women, we do things because we have a purpose to do it. All about the golden circle, Simon Sinek and all that. That is so true when we talk about women. We are not feel confident working in the kind of company we have right now. We are looking for a new way of company, of these triple impact companies. Companies that have a new way of seeing things, a new way of building the society. And I see that we don't find that places right now?
I want to get to just the last question that I'll ask, but I want to point out one other factoid that is very significant. And that is that if women are not working, there are other societal repercussions. And one of them is violence against women. And the statistics are rather startling that 1 out of 2 women will be a victim of sexual violence in various parts of Latin America. Brazil, in any given year, 29% of the women report an act of sexual abuse in a single year. And then there's the incidence of what's called femicide, which is baby killing based on gender. And 10 of the top 25 countries where femicide happens are in Latin America. And there is a connection between the economic well-being of women and their subjugation or victimization due to sexual abuse. So there are broad ramifications that go beyond economics in terms of what happens to women as a consequence of lack of employment and lack of independence. Sorry about that dire note, but it is something to bear in mind. I want to just ask my last question and then turn it over to the audience about entrepreneurship and whether that's not just a remedy, but an opportunity that may solve some of the access issues that women have in the workplace. But entrepreneurship is not just about having your own idea and getting it to market. It's often about access to capital. And we know that while women tend to create their own businesses, they're very small scale. And here, for sure, I think women have access to about 6% or venture capital funding. When you look at it by gender, 6% of VC funding goes to women, meaning 94% goes to men. So what's the situation in Latin America? Is entrepreneurship an answer? And will women have the access to the support that will enable them to grow businesses? And I'm actually going to start this time from Ambassador Nahón on this.
Well, I think, sorry to go back to your previous comment, but I think that what you pointed out in terms of addressing violence against women is a very important part of this discussion, and it certainly is worth mentioning it. If we want to continue building more egalitarian, more inclusive societies, more peaceful societies, we certainly need to address the different aspects of violence that is exercised against women: domestic violence, in human trafficking, violence also in armed conflicts all around the world. You know that women are specifically vulnerable in a lot of these conflicts, and there are specific ways of abusing our women in war and conflict situations. So there's been a lot of work taking place at the United Nations. There's a lot of domestic legislation that many of our countries have passed addressing the specific aspects of women violence. We have, I think, a good legislation on that, and we certainly need to continue working on enforcing that, in particular on issues on human trafficking, for example, which is certainly key. We cannot think about more women leaders and more participation of women in general if we don't address also this very real aspect of women life all throughout the world.
It's important to recognize that employment gives women independence, that enables them to have an out when they're sexually violated.
I agree with you. I think that having a job in this society is one of the best ways of being included in society, and certainly having rights associated to the job and having the possibility to educate yourself and continue being in society. So certainly economic growth, social inclusion, and jobs and protected jobs, I mean formal jobs, is the best way to work towards a more egalitarian society. But of course we also need specific programs, as we all have to address the issue of violence, which is an international, in many ways, trafficking and all that are international problems and international flagellos that we need to also address in a coordinated way through regional organizations, through international organizations. But of course, and just one quick note, I think that on the jobs aspects, the G20 last year, I think, did a very interesting statement in the leaders' declaration that was supported by all the G20 countries to which Argentina belongs. In Brisbane, it was included for the first time a reference to the importance of, I have it here, I think, to the importance of continue building and closing the gap between men and women participation in the labor market, with the goal of bringing more than 100 million women into the labor force as a way also to increasing growth and reducing poverty. So I think that the discussion that we're having here has also positively been acknowledged by the G20 in terms of the importance of incorporating women to the labor market increasingly more.
So Ambassador Davidow, I'll try and steer you back to the entrepreneurship question and whether that's the answer, and access to venture capital.
I certainly believe it's a factor, a good answer. We've placed a lot of focus on microfinance. And I must say, and this is without having the benefit of any specific knowledge, which is something that encumbers me most of the time, I am not sure that microfinance, as it has been implemented, has done that much to promote economic development. I think it is, in many cases, made very poor people less poor, which is an important development. But in terms as being a motor for economic development in society, I'm not sure it has done the job. And I'd be delighted if somebody would call me out on that. But certainly entrepreneurship really is of great importance. And the question then becomes, if we recognize that entrepreneurs need capital, need seed money, where should that come from? Should governments set aside money for gender development via entrepreneurship? I mean, it seems to me that that is something that is worth discussing. Should corporations, as part of their programs of corporate social responsibility, be encouraged to look in that direction? I think we can agree that this is a major factor. I personally don't have the answers as to how it can be stimulated.
Fernanda, you're the expert.
Well, yes. I strongly believe that entrepreneurship is a great tool to change the situation. And I believe, and we are working to make micro-entrepreneur more professional. I mean, we have a huge problem because we have a lot of micro-entrepreneurs. I mean, if you see the figures, we have plenty of women micro-entrepreneurs, but the quality is very poor of that kind of companies. Actually, they pay low, salaries, and they are not formalized, they are not part of the economy, most of them. So what we need is to give them the knowledge and the training to be professional. We are working with that with a platform that is called anderson.ucla that we created. Also, we need to train and to help and support women in the middle size to go to have bigger businesses and start making business in all the region, not only in the countries. And that's why we developed HUB, which is 8AB, like a Latinized word for hub, that it's a platform to connect companies in Latin America, and we are giving them, special support to do well in that platform. Because we really believe that we have to place them the opportunities. About accessing funding, it's almost zero. It's very hard for women that own a company any size to get funded in Latin America. I don't see women presenting to investment funds. I haven't seen any, or maybe one or two, be presenting the company to a big investment fund. Latin America, I don't know, maybe one but maybe it was demand of the team, the one we're presenting, to getting, risk funding. Going to the banks and getting a credit is almost impossible. I mean, the rates are awful. I mean, you were talking about taxes, but what about the rates of the credits? I mean, it's insane. And they ask you for please give me all the taxes you have paid the last 3 years, and we are just starting, so it's insane. And the government give us money, especially in Chile. They have good funding, but they give funding without the training. And I think that is a big mistake. Big mistake.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Please go to the microphone right next to you. Thank you. We may take one or two questions.
Actually, this is not really a question, but it's just kind of a statement, and that is that maybe the way to get more women, and particularly in the U.S. and even foreign countries like South America, I'm from Argentina, is to educate those shareholders, institutional shareholders, activist shareholders, hedge funds, private funds, because they're the ones who have the most direct contact with upper management and the CEOs. And if they get educated that the ROE and ROI, as Judy mentioned, is higher when you have women on the boards, then they're probably going to start thinking that maybe their performance bonus is going to be more dependent on the better performance of the company that they own those shares. So I think that is one area that I don't see a lot of work being done. And I concur with you that, women are integral factor in better ROEs and ROIs. So look for those activist shareholders, institutional funds, mutual funds, money managers, and there are very few, and I'm not sure that they fully understand it at this point, but a little bit of education or a lot of education may make you change the psychology of the CEO.
Thank you. Please go to the microphone. No, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Carlos Morgner. I own a construction management firm here in Los Angeles building the Metro Rail. I had a luncheon today. I'm on the board of the Women's Transportation Seminar here in Los Angeles, about 3,000 women nationwide.
Good.
About 500 of us here in Los Angeles, so Hilda Solis was our speaker. On the board, what we did is form an organization surrounded on a service, which is transportation. So based on that transportation, the women get together, and we have women in electrical, we have women in building rail systems, we have women in real estate. So it's a nucleus that forms you with an objective, and it helps you get direction in being successful here. Also, I'm on the board at Metro downtown, and we did a disparity study. So we showed how the women were being discriminated. So we did set quotas, even though it's difficult. I'm not completely in favor of quotas, but what it does is, if you want to build a UCLA, the big boys aren't going to give you any, or shift it down. So it helps to spread the wealth around. Finally, I was with the mayor in Mexico last year, and one thing that impressed me was we had like 20,000 Mexicans coming to our universities, and I think we had 200,000 Asians. So I kind of concluded that maybe it's poverty, and you have to pay to play to come over here and educate yourself and be part of the system. So what I'm kind of saying is that there's a lot of challenges, but I think these quotas and these systems and the system that's working here may work over there. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, one more.
Thank you so much for being here. My name is Daniela Castillo. I am from Colombia, and we're so thankful for having you here. So my question goes really for you two women. I'm from Colombia, and I was raised in a home where I always saw my mom at home cooking, always doing everything for all of us, for my brother. And I see the culture that we see in our countries is like that. So how do we change that, or how do we educate our families and our women so that they know they have to go way far beyond that? And do you think that's why we probably want to raise our family and we don't want to go further in our careers?
And Daniela, how did you make the move to break away from the family?
Well, actually, I was blessed enough to be in a family where education was really important. So even though my mom was a housewife, they always kept encouraging me to follow my dreams. And That's why I'm here. So I want other women to do the same, but it's so hard when your culture tells you to be in the house and, you know, to take care of your family and have children and just be a good mother and a good housewife and a good worker. And so how do you change that mentality?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I go?
Go ahead, Ambassador.
Well, I think
Oh,
you have to do both. I mean, you have to do the whole housework and then you have to do the work. And that's the only way to do it. I mean, our alternative cost to go out and work is too high. Because in Latin America, we have this family issue that is so strong. I mean, we live with our parents until 30 years old. So families, it is the most important thing for us. It is the center of our life. I'm here, and I have my children, I have my husband, and I have here right now because they allow me to do it. I mean, actually, they support me. Otherwise, I couldn't be here. But I think you have to figure out how to do both. For us, it's so important. We can't do just one of those things.
Go ahead.
I agree. I love our culture, and I'm proud of it, and it also involves strong women and strong examples of leadership that are motivating other younger women to get involved in politics, in business. Of course, education is very important, but there's a lot going on. We didn't mention much about the world of diplomacy. We are seeing in the world and in the region, in Argentina, certainly also greater involvement of women in diplomacy, which was traditionally a men's club, absolutely. Still not enough female ambassadors. For example, in Washington, we're only 25 out of a lot. But then you see, for example, in the case of Argentina, we have all female ambassadors in all North America, US, UN, Mexico, Canada, and there are other countries in Latin America that have also a lot of female ambassadors in the region and women that have been given the chance to represent and honor their countries. So I think, again, it's a complex discussion, but there are good reasons to keep on working on it.
Daniela, let me just add the McKinsey study that I mentioned at the outset that did the 400 companies and in the US, UK, Latin America, etc. They looked at the barriers for women advancement, and the number one barrier was the double burden. Exactly what Fernanda was talking about, doing both. You've heard me before, and my advice applies to anyone, anywhere, any country. Have the discussion in advance with your partner so that you do not bear the double burden. With that, thank you so much to the panel.